Welcome back to A Global Kitchen. Today I'm going to go through the process of making fresh rice paper rolls. You might also know them as salad rolls or summer rolls. You shouldn't be intimidated by them. They're not hard to make. It's all about being organized and knowing a few simple techniques on how to assemble and roll them. My goal today is to walk you through the process in detail, and then once you have the hang of it, you can customize the fillings to your liking. You'll find several rice paper roll recipes in my cookbook, Vegetarian Vietnam. Trying to keep Charlie busy while I produce and shoot today's video. If you're planning to use some rice vermicelli noodles, the first thing you want to do is to cook them. This gives them time to rehydrate and plump up as you prepare the rest of the filling ingredients and the dipping sauce. The next thing I'm going to do is to make the dipping sauce. This way it's already done once you finish rolling the rolls. Today I'm going to make a vegan version of the classic everyday table sauce. But as an alternative, check out my Basic Pantry series. There's a lovely peanutty fermented soybean sauce that goes really well with fresh rice paper rolls. To make the dipping sauce, I'm going to put in 3 tablespoons of sugar, a 1/4 cup of water, a couple of tablespoons of rice vinegar. I'm going to add in a teaspoon of soy sauce just for a little flavor and color, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to add in some lime juice. I'm going to give the lime a good roll on the cutting board to loosen the pulp up inside, and that makes it easier to get out more juice. You want about 1 tablespoon and a teaspoon, which is just about the juice of a lime. You want to stir the dipping sauce until all of the sugar is completely dissolved. This will take several minutes. If I'm planning to serve the rice paper rolls for a small gathering, I'll make the sauce up to this point and then refrigerate it up to a day in advance. And then about an hour or so before I'm planning to serve them, I'll add in the garlic and the chili. I find that their flavors intensify the longer they sit in the sauce. You may also want to double or triple the dipping sauce recipe, especially if you're planning on giving people individualized bowls for their dipping sauce. If you or someone in your family doesn't like too much chili heat, I recommend starting off with like a mild chili. So this long red chili, use like a 1/4 or a 1/3. Make sure you take out the seeds and some of the membrane so that you lose some of the heat, and finely chop it. If you like a mild chili heat, cut the Thai bird chili in half and scrape out those seeds. And if you like a lip numb tingling heat, use the whole Thai bird chili. And if you're stuck, you can always use like 1/2 teaspoon or more of sambal oelek. Today I'm going to use the mild red chili because I'm going to end up serving this to one of my children's friends who doesn't like too much heat. Finely chop the chili, stir it into the sauce, and don't forget to wash your hands. So we have our dipping sauce ready, so let's set that aside. Now let's move on to the filling. So the first layer, I always like to put some type of leafy green. So I prefer using soft buttery leaves from Boston or Bibb because they're more delicate and they don't necessarily have stronger ribs like a large romaine might that possibly could break through the rice paper. So I like to first take off the leaves and then wash them. And then I'll either cut them, you can either cut them or tear them into pieces that are roughly the size of your palm. That's a nice size, and it gives you a nice guide to the size and length of the rest of the fillings should be. Now, I find that something like these smaller Cos lettuce, you know, these tiny romaines, these are good, but what you want to do, I find that they're a little bit long, so sometimes I like to trim them off after I've washed them. And again, the size of the palm of my hand. I think that works really well. Now just be careful because these are pretty delicate and they're not too strong, this part of the rib, but on a larger romaine lettuce, I would kind of trim this out and then use that for another salad, but I just use the more delicate leafy part of the romaine. Make sure you spin dry the lettuce. Any excess water that clings to it may soften the rice paper, making it prone to tear or break. If you're going to use something like, here's some baby spinach, the only thing that you need to be careful of, or with the mesclun mixes, is these little stems. So this seems pretty delicate, but I find that sometimes if they're a bit bigger, they're a bit tougher, you may want to just cut them off or tear them off, because they also have a tendency to pierce the rice paper, and then it breaks, and then you kind of feel a little defeated. And that's the only reason why. Whereas if you were to use just like the leaf and not the stem, there's less chance of it piercing the rice paper. Herbs add a bright freshness to rice paper rolls. Try to use 2 or 3 types for added complexity of flavor. Today I'm using cilantro, Thai basil, and mint. Other types of micro sprouts like cress, mustard, or radish are tasty additions. Thai basil adds a nice anise flavor. Whatever the herb, pick off the leaves from the tough stems. They tend to puncture through the rice paper. The upper, more delicate leaves are okay to keep whole. When the leaves are larger, especially mint and Thai basil, tear them in half. When I'm making a bunch of fresh rice paper rolls, I organize the herbs in separate bunches instead of mixing them. This helps to guarantee I can put a couple of leaves of each herb into each roll. After the lettuce and herbs, there is a variety of ingredients you can use for the filling. Today I'm using cucumber, carrot, and some daikon pickle I had in the fridge. The 2 things you want to think about are the thickness and the length of those ingredients. Again, for the length, use the palm of your hand as a guide for how long things should be cut. You want them to be about 3 to 4 inches in length, and you want the vegetables or the filling ingredients to all be the same length. When you're using harder vegetables like carrots, you want to make sure that they're fairly thin, so about an 1/8 of an inch thick. You can either cut them 2 ways, with a Japanese mandolin or by hand with a knife. If I'm using cucumber, I like to use these smaller Persian cucumbers. Now these ones are quite small, normally they're about this long, but I find them to be the perfect length for rolls. You can use an English cucumber too, and I'll show you how to cut them. Cut a small Persian cucumber into thin slices using a knife or Japanese mandolin. Grab a stack of slices and cut them into thin strips. You can also cut them into thin wedges. For English cucumbers, use the width of your hand as a ruler or guide for how long to cut the cucumber. Cut it just slightly smaller than the width of your hand. Then cut them, using a knife or Japanese mandolin, into 1/4 inch thick slices, and cut them into thin strips. For other long, dense vegetables like carrots or radishes, again, use your hand to help determine how long to cut it. Trim off a rounded side, place the flat side against the cutting board or Japanese mandolin, and cut or slide it into thin slices, between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. Denser vegetables like carrots, celery root, raw beets are better at 1/8 of an inch. It's okay for juicier vegetables like radishes, kohlrabi, and jicama to be a touch thicker. Don't forget to use the hand guard and to adjust the thickness after the first couple of cuts. Stack the vegetables in 2 or 3 layers and cut them into thin strips. So I've organized all the vegetables together on the tray. Notice that they're roughly the same length. The daikon pickle's a bit shorter, but that's the way I cut it, but shorter would be better than longer. As you get more comfortable making the rolls and you start to freestyle with the ingredients that you're using for the filling, you always want to think about how you're cutting them. Think about the thickness and think about the length. For bell peppers, trim off the top and bottom ends. Cut through one side of the pepper and trim out the inner core. Cut it into 2 or 3 large pieces and trim out any large ribs. Cut it into 1/4 inch thick strips. I find thicker 1/2 inch thick strips harder to work with as a filling, but they're great for dips. If you want to include dense raw vegetables like fennel or cabbage, use a Japanese mandolin to slice them. Try to slice them thinner than you can with a knife, so around a 1/16 of an inch. You want them to be thin and flexible. It makes them easier to roll. It's best to cut avocados about the width of your baby finger. For proteins like tofu, I like to use marinated, smoked, or fried slabs of tofu. You can use either the long or short side of the block of tofu that I'm cutting now as a guide for its length. Just keep the length and width of the strips consistent. It's best to cut the tofu into strips that are 3 to 4 inches long and 1/4 to 1/2 an inch thick. So now that we have all of the filling ingredients ready, it's time to move on to the rolling part. So first what you want to do is you want to set yourself up so everything is within reach. So what I like to do is I have a cutting board, I have all of my cut ingredients, and I try to organize them in the order that I'm going to place them onto the rice paper. You want to make sure that the water bath that you're using to rehydrate the rice paper is right nearby. And then finally, have a plate that you can put the finished rolls onto. So there are two ways that I like to set up my water, and it really depends on the configuration of the kitchen that I'm in. If I'm in a kitchen that doesn't have much counter space next to the stove, I'll set it up like this, and I'll get a nice area on a table or on a counter. And I like to use a large pie dish, but that's shallow, to rehydrate the rice paper. If I'm in a kitchen where there is some counter space next to the stove, like here, I'll set everything up right in this area, and that way I can use a shallow frying pan for the water bath. The temperature of the water that you're using to rehydrate the rice paper is really important. You want it to be about the temperature that you would normally take a bath in. So something where you can comfortably put your fingers in and it's not too hot. I find if as the water gets cool, it takes longer for the rice paper to rehydrate. So there's two things that you can do as the water cools and you're rolling. If you're in this situation, you can simply boil some water in the kettle and add it to the water bath and then just wait for it to cool if it's too hot. Or if you're working in this situation here, you can just turn the burner on and then let it warm up gently over low heat and then turn it off. And this way you can do this on and off a number of times as you roll the rice paper. So to rehydrate the rice paper, I think what a lot of people think is you have to really dunk it in there and kind of drown it. That's something you don't want to do. Okay, so don't just put it in there, leave it, walk away. Oh, I need to get something from here. Use a chopstick. And it rehydrates too quickly, and you'll see, look how quick that was. It just gets really, really sticky, and then this is where I think a lot of people go wrong when they're making rice paper rolls. So what you want to do is you have your rice paper, and you just want to put it in and rotate it, and you're really counting to about 4 or 5. Put it in, take it out. Now it'll keep on rehydrating as you work. So you lay it down on your surface, and then I've got my lettuce leaf. I want to put it down in the bottom 1/3, and then break off just about a tablespoon of noodles. Okay, this is also where I think people go wrong, is they put too much rice vermicelli noodles in it, and then it just gets too full. Then you want to put on a little bit of herbs. So I like to set it up where I put a little bit of each, and this is why I don't mix up the herbs, so I get a little taste of each of the herbs. Next, I'll put just 3 or 4 sticks of carrot, similar of cucumber, 3 or 4, and then again, some daikon. So you have it right there. Now when you roll it, you just want to roll it over. You don't want it to be too tight, but not too loose. So bring it together. I do one roll over, and then I take one outside and I fold it over just a little bit towards the inner part. I bring the other side together, so then it's like that. And then I kind of just tightly, just with a little bit of pressure, but not too much, roll it. So let's cut this in half to show the lovely cross section of ingredients. To eat them, just set yourself up with your own dipping bowl. Any small bowl will do. And just dunk the fresh rice paper roll into it and munch away. I love eating these no matter what the filling is. Afterwards, I always feel like I've had something light and healthy. Don't forget to make sure that the dipping sauce is well seasoned. The fresh rolls themselves don't have any seasoning in them other than the brightness of the herbs and the natural flavors of the vegetables. If you plan to make these in advance for your own meal, or you want to serve them as a pre-dinner snack for when friends come over, the best thing to do is leave them in a single layer. I find that if you stack them, the rice paper tends to stick to each other and then they tear, and it doesn't look nice when you present them. The other thing that you want to do is cover them with a lightly dampened kitchen towel, whether it's several layers of paper towel or a clean kitchen towel, but make sure it's lightly damp and that will prevent them from drying out. You can also wrap them with plastic wrap and keep them in the refrigerator. That way if anything spills, your hard work is still covered. I hope today's video has given you greater confidence in assembling and rolling your own fresh rice paper rolls. As you start to play around with different filling combinations, please leave me a comment below or tag me on social media and let me know what are your favorite ones. So let's do a quick recap of the main points in assembling and rolling rice paper rolls. Cook the noodles first and let them plump up as you prepare the rest of the ingredients. Prepare your dipping sauce if you want to eat the rolls right away. Use soft, buttery greens about the size of your palm. Pick the herbs from their tough stems. Cut the filling ingredients the same length and similar thickness. Organize your work area and use warm water for rehydrating the rice paper. Lay the greens down first as a protective barrier. Don't put in too much filling. Use your fingers to hold the filling in as you roll them. Try to roll them snugly. And lastly, and most importantly, enjoy them with family and friends. I'm a little hungry after all of that. I think I'm gonna sit here and have a snack. Thanks again for watching. Bye and happy cooking.